for joining me, on Colony Kids SOS. This is, we've been doing this series, I think, since February, where we speak to creatives and innovators and thinkers, artists, and so on, normally from Hong Kong, around their craft, their art practice, how it relates to Hong Kong, normally, the city, and especially during times of crisis. And today we have with us label and music platform, Eastern Margins, who I guess I met you guys when you did an interview with me about 2 months ago, which you can find on your Instagram. So thanks so much. And this, our first sort of on virtual, and then that you guys are not actually in Hong Kong. So that's quite special as well. And I think once we start speaking about the content, people will understand why we've engaged you guys to do this conversation. But for people who don't know you guys, do you want to start off by introducing yourselves personally and Eastern Margins and how you guys started off?
Yeah. Who wants to go first?
And you go first.
Okay,
I'll go first. Got this.
Hi, I'm Anthony. I'm an architect, but I also do like the creative direction and artwork stuff for Eastern Margins. So with Lumi, we sort of founded Eastern Margins about 3 years ago. We were sort of just looking for a party to go to on Lunar New Year, and couldn't find anything that we thought really sort of suited what we were looking for. It was all sort of either big Leicester Square clubs or going to go to karaoke somewhere. So we thought it would be fun to sort of run our own club night, and it sort of spiraled on from there. I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit more. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm Stefan, and I grew up in Hong Kong originally, and after I got back to London, at a point I managed to loop in with Ant and Lumi to get involved in Eastern Margins. And I mean, I think Ant's been quite humble when he just starts sort of saying, it starts off with a party, but what Eastern Margins is really about now is it's become so much more than that. It's become a platform and a label, which are both aimed at spotlighting East Asian and Southeast Asian artists, whether they're currently living in those regions or they're part of the wider diaspora. And our basic core concept, whether it's in the EPs that we've been releasing recently, we're up to number 3, or the parties that we're hosting. Back last year, they would have been in real life. Now they're more digital. We really just want to be able to give artists who don't always have the opportunity to land gigs or to reach out to a fan base that possibility.
Yeah, and so I'm Elaine. So I grew up in Hong Kong, went to school there, came to the UK for university, moved to London. I've been here for 5 years now. And so out of us 3, I'm like the most recent member who joined Eastern Margins earlier this year. But I'd always been aware of it because I went to university with Dave and with Lumi and Stefan. And then I also knew Ant from way back in like all of us growing up in Hong Kong as well. And so now I help with our kind of like editorial voice. Stefan and I both work on the Tea House series, where we interview individuals from creative communities across Asia and its diaspora, including you, Chantal. And just to echo what Stefan was saying, I guess, like when I joined earlier this year, I felt like it was very much kind of like in the discussions with the rest of Eastern Margins. It was very much, moving from events to more of a platform. With the label launch, developing a deeper editorial voice, we really wanted to symbolize an evolution of what our community meant to us. Of course, a large part of it is about enjoying music together, but now it's really moved beyond just music to also appreciating like art, visual culture, virtual worlds, and kind of experimenting with that dialectic.
Mm-hmm. We start off the conversation a little bit heavy. So considering the world right now, how are you guys feeling? I know you guys just re-entered lockdown. How are you guys coping and dealing with the world?
I feel like we should have gone back to Hong Kong. I see everybody on social media in Hong Kong just having a great time, going to parties and whatnot, whereas we've just gone right back into lockdown. And it's personally, I don't know what you guys are finding, but I find it like way more depressing than first time around. Hugely because of the weather. We're entering into winter, and it's nice and sunny now, but when it gets dark at about 3 p.m., that's a complete bummer. But you know, there's positive things going on. See what happened in the US. See what happened in the US recently. We've got with Biden, we've got vaccines coming up. I think I kind of like to see this as a bit of, what's the phrase for that?
Light at the
The
end
night
of
is
the tunnel.
darkest before the dawn, you know.
Yeah.
I feel like it's getting really crappy again, but come Christmas, come 2021, hit me. We're gonna have a really good time.
2021 is gonna be our year.
Yeah.
Not 2020. It's
Hype.
2021.
I personally, I know we touched on this a bit, Chantal, before the recording started, but like I personally feel like we've just been kind of depressed for so long, and we've had such an onslaught of bad news. And very recently, with like the US election, with COVID vaccines, there's been like, you know, a tiny bit of positive news in the world, not necessarily in what I read in Hong Kong. Like that definitely still breaks my heart. But I am just very like, we need to move forward now, because like we just can't be sad anymore. There's been like, we've gone through so much trauma. It's like we have to just, yeah, like return to a sense of normality and keep going, and just kind of like close this chapter as well. And I don't know how you're feeling.
Yeah, I don't know. In a way, maybe I'm feeling a little bit more positive. As I might have said, I'm a bit of a homebody anyway, so do quite enjoy just being at home. But in general, I think there's quite a lot of. It's quite interesting just to see the way that things are changing, you know, in the way that global economies work and the expanding culture of working from home and virtual working, and a lot of this digital life that's coming a lot more to life these days is, you know, quite interesting and I think quite promising. And yeah, I think I'm quite hopeful for this sort of era where, in a way, like everything's sort of relocalized, and because you kind of can't go as far, but also it's a lot more global as well, and the things that you can sort of reach out, which I think, you know, is a pretty interesting time to be in. So
actually, also, I would also say, because apart from Eastern Margins, I work in a climate action NGO, and I would say like one positive is that a lot of governments are realize, like not enough, but some are realizing that the pandemic is also a great opportunity to build back like a green recovery. So I think that's like a little hope that we can hold on to as well.
Little hopes. Little hopes. 2021 is all about little hopes.
In between all this shit, it's about those.
You just got to set the bar fairly low.
Real low. Real low bar.
Real low.
Okay. You guys have, to me, you guys have quite a specific sound. How would you, I mean, would you agree with that? And how would you describe it? And do you guys all agree on what Eastern, the type of music and sound that Eastern Margins represents and, you know, aligns with? How would you describe it, I guess?
I think in a way, I guess for me, I actually find a lot of the work that we do to be quite varied in terms of genres. Not that there isn't, you know, something in common about all of them, but I think our interests in music are pretty varied and quite broad. But I guess in a way we're sort of tending to focus more on the experimental music side. A lot of what's going on in East and Southeast Asian club scenes as well. For example, I guess, you know, looking back at our label releases, Il Japonya's was a bit of an eclectic mix of, it was singing, rapping, screaming, sort of like shoegaze style. Whereas QQ Baby Girl's a bit more sort of deconstructed club, jagged textures with the vocals going all over it. and in a similar vein, that was Sumu Sumu and Lanes' collaboration as well, a bit more club. And I guess the thing that's sort of in common about all of them is that they're just sort of artists that are trying to find the sort of the new sound of where they're at and trying to explore and bring their own roots, but also be informed by just contemporary club music as well. So yeah, I guess that's sort of what what we're after, trying to sort of find what's going on in these underground scenes and platform them in a way.
Would you all
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, I was just going to add, go on, Stefan.
You started, Izzy, go off.
No, I was just going to quickly add, I also think what's really cool about like the different artists that we platform is that most of them, if not maybe all of them, have like a really strong visual aesthetic as well. Like we really think they have such good style, design, and that's like a huge part of their identity along with their sound. So yeah, that's something we really respect as well, because design is obviously so core to Easter Margins too.
Yeah, 100%. I was just going to echo what everyone is saying. I really think, it's we all come from quite different musical backgrounds with interests in, rock, jazz, pop, techno, straight club music. And we're just completely open to whatever our collaborators and artists are into at the moment. And it's really goes back to our sort of core mission of giving a platform to people whose music doesn't necessarily get shared all that widely or doesn't have that much traction at the moment.
And have you heard stuff and you're just like, you just unanimously agree and you're like, that's not Eastern Margins? You don't have to name anybody, but like, so what kind of, like, yeah, does that happen?
Personally, I think the more divisive the music is, the more Eastern Margins it is. I don't know if you guys would agree.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I think especially, when we used to our previous parties, we would often have kind of themes. Like, for example, when we had the Absurd Tracks guys come in, they kind of dominated the lineup. But that didn't necessarily mean that we would say, okay, our warm-up DJs or ending closing DJs or our performances in between had to align completely. If we can like keep the audience and the fans kind of on their toes, that kind of like made for more interesting atmosphere, I think.
You guys mentioned before, or Ant mentioned before, sort of the sounds that like these individual artists are really trying to create their own sound, and the more experimental, the more like interesting. But is there a particular kind of sound that comes from different places? Like, would you say that in Thailand there's kind of something you can recognize, or in Hong Kong there's something that you could recognize? Is there a locality to sound or to visuality and design that you find is specific?
Yeah. Think about that.
I go on. Wait,
go
I'll
for it,
just say
Lane. You
this
go
first,
first.
and then you go next. Personally, what I've noticed is that a lot of our artists, I don't know about regionality in sound per se, but I would say a lot of our artists, what I think is really interesting to their, I guess, like character, is that they usually juxtapose what are very like on the surface opposing sounds. So for example, or like opposing styles. So like QQ Baby Girl, we've spoken to her about how she loves Japanese idol culture. It's all very cutesy, kawaii, but rather than the kind of like, going with their music, her music is like extremely deep, club heavy bass. And she really likes to kind of put that juxtaposition together. And then equally, say like Anam from Vietnam, they like their music is all based around using traditional like heritage woodwind, like old Vietnamese instruments, but then putting electronic, modern, contemporary sounds over it. And that's what we think is really like, that's definitely what I've noticed is really interesting. It's just, I feel like the artists we platform are very like, they just have a different perspective and they think it's really cool to kind of explore that.
I think there's probably quite a lot of, I guess, cross-pollination across the region, which is quite interesting. You have a lot of people, for example, Gabor Modus Operandi, that works with sort of experimental Javanese rave sounds, released their stuff on what, Subcult, I think, which is based in Shanghai, and I think there's a sort of regional scene as well that sort of ties everybody together as sort of this network of artists. So I think there is a sort of sense of cohesion in general. I would say.
That's definitely what I found as well. You just kind of, I actually thought, like Chantal, the way your question went, I also expected that, the Chinese sounds like this, the Korean sounds like this. But I've actually really found that when we talk to our contacts, at Subcult or we're talking to Genome 6 MVP, they're kind of like, oh yeah, we know those guys in Vietnam, we know Annam. Oh yeah, like we've hung out with Upper Randy last time we did a festival in Europe, and like it actually seems that this kind of yearning for something different, something that's just different from straightforward 4/4 techno and your dance and your club scene, something more deconstructed. Because I think what it might be as well is that because the actual core audiences in some of these countries, especially if you go to Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, I mean, you go to some of these clubs, there just aren't that many people who are into this, but the ones that are really into it. And I think because of that, the artists almost out of necessity have to appeal to those same communities across Asia and across the world as well.
I guess in a way, the sort of musical style isn't established enough for it to have, such distinct labels like, Chicago house or Detroit techno. It's still sort of really brewing at quite a regional level still, which I think is really, really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I totally agree with Stefan's point. Like, there's literally not enough appreciation in their local communities often. So we feel that, like, yeah, like that's why they're just so happy to be connected to other artists who are into the same thing, because it definitely, it's just not as established as a community a lot of the time locally for them.
I think I skipped something in the beginning. So you kind of mentioned that you knew each other. Talk about the founding and the conception of you guys and how you guys all came together. Actually, I find that really like a nice sort of intimate familial story. You guys knew each other in Hong Kong, and then you went to school together, actually, or some of you went to school with Lumi. And then you just started to like also want to help out, or how do you actually guys know each other, and is it a kind of ongoing collective, or and how do you work together? Like, do you guys play different parts and so on?
I guess we all sort of play our different roles. I mean, I guess in terms of our historical background, say, Stefan and I went to primary school together. And then and then we met, and then I moved to the UK when I was 13, and some of us, I think Elaine and Stefan went to uni with Lumi, and everybody else we sort of just got in touch through our events, really. I mean, there's quite a few of us, there's me, Stefan, Elaine, Lumi, Jex, JDX, and Aria. But I guess Eastern Margins is also more, it's like a broader family as well. It's like a community of artists that we work with, and even just people that have been attending our live shows and live streams from day one. I guess what do we each do? Do you want to explain that?
I would say definitely.
Go on, Izzy.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I definitely think everyone does a bit of everything. But Stefan, do you want to go into more detail about specific roles, or I find it really hard to define.
If you guys don't, we don't have to go there either. It's
No, I mean, I was just going to say, I think that everyone does a bit of everything, but the main role, the highlight, is that the creative genius and the aesthetics all comes from Ant.
Definitely, for sure.
Our Instagram page and our content would be a very different place if it wasn't for Ant's artistic talent, and maybe a lot of that deep-rooted in his kind of architectural training as well.
Yeah,
Whereas,
completely.
and for me and EZ's point of view, we're really keen on the the storytelling aspect. We really see ourselves as trying to push forward the narratives of the artists that we work with. I think because we come from a bit more of a removed aspect of the music, we don't necessarily DJ or produce like some of the other members do. We actually sometimes see a gap in when Lumi or Jex can get both so excited about an artist that they've heard of and it's incredibly niche that they found in some hole in SoundCloud. They'd be like, obviously you guys all know this artist, this is sick, and he's gonna go, well, hold on a second. If we're gonna start promoting them, we need to like build a bridge here. We need to accept that a lot of our like fans, our community, have no idea what we're talking about. And we need to, what is Javanese rave culture? What is the underground scene in Shanghai? There's stories there to be unpacked and told to really give ultimate impact, I think.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, that's like a conversation we've been having recently as well around like we realize the importance in, elaborating on the narrative of the community as well, because otherwise we didn't want Eastern Margins to almost become like, just become so insular. It was just like there was a point where we decided, okay, no, it's not just for our community. We do want to like we're creating a space for our community, but we don't want to not communicate with the outside world at all. We do want to, help promote them as well. And so that's kind of why that storytelling element became more important to us. But just to quickly introduce the other members too. So Lumi, he's of course DJ, producer, co-founder with Ant. He leads on a lot of the label stuff, which is awesome. I feel like we see him as like our uncle because he's a bit older than us. We were a bit like
vision.
Jax, she's music like DJ as well. She does a lot of like our hosting and social media stuff too, as like a kind of personality. Oh God, I feel like I'm doing a really bad job with describing people. Do you guys want to do Patrick? Patrick, he's also DJ. He does like him and Lumi do our garden Spotify playlists every week, like the Eastern Margins Garden. They play loads of our sets. And Arya is our most recent member. He recently joined because he's been helping us so much with the virtual ceremony shows, like all the digital shows we've been doing, and he's really like technically amazing as well, and has been part of the Eastern Margins community, coming to our events for ages too. I don't know if anyone else has any other.
I was just going to say that Arya coming in recently is a really good example of how the Eastern Margins community is not just our team, our core team, but it is everybody that we work with and we collaborate with, or people who just came to our events regularly. And someone like Arya is someone who just came every 2 months to one of our parties. He always loved it. When we started doing the digital stuff, we reached out just on Instagram, like, yo, who can help with this sort of thing? Who knows how to do streaming with these software? How to do a Twitch stream? Arya hit us up, was like, yo, I'd like to help out. And yeah, now he's real part of the core crew, and he's completely been such a lifesaver in the work that he's been doing with that, especially with the PR work on our latest release.
Yeah, Stefan and I were laughing because I think Arya asked, like Lumi was like, oh, Arya said he would like to join. How do we all feel about this? And we were like, what do you mean, how do we feel about this? Like, I can't believe he's asking. We definitely need him to join. Oh my God.
Why have you not asked him first?
Yeah, like why has no one contacted him before? But yeah.
So you guys started off as this platform and you're creating content, and then you have now released 3 EPs. How has Eastern Margins evolved beyond, I guess, your initial expectations? And I guess how has it evolved as a collective? Like now you take on more responsibility. You guys have like artists under your belt. Like how do you, like I guess beyond philosophically, operationally as well, you guys have taken a lot more than you did before. Has it also changed the fabric or evolved the fabric of Eastern Margins and the way that you work and the content that you produce?
Yeah, we're now absolutely obsessed with our Google Drive. It's like
It's
where
all
we
about
all live. It's all about the spreadsheets.
assets contained in one place. I mean, what I'd say is I think Eastern Margin's just been growing so fast. I think at each point of where we are, we just kind of think, wow, we've achieved this level. This is great. You know, going to even doing the second or third party, we're like, wow, this is, you know, we're doing regular parties and people are coming. This is great. Then we think, how can we be a bit more ambitious? And then the next year we threw a sound clash where we basically got 4 big music groups in the underground scene in London to do like a battle against each other. And we had like 500 people in the event. And we're like, wow, our limit's just gone up here again. Then the coronavirus hits and we think, oh crap, what are we going to do? Well, that's the same time our label started coming out. And when we started exploring the idea of virtual events, our Eastern Margin ceremonies. So I think the main point is operationally, we're still figuring it out. We don't necessarily have a huge framework to know exactly what we're doing at any given stage, because we're always trying to be innovative and try something new, and we're never just selling for the status quo.
Yeah, I think we've been operating a bit reactionally to just the way things have been happening, which is, you know, not really a bad thing, I don't think. Just because when we were sort of starting out, we were still sort of establishing what we were really setting out to do. I think at first we didn't really envision a big platform or anything. We just thought it was more of a club night, and then sort of as it sort of grows, you realize then you sort of have this responsibility to be careful who you platform and so on, and it sort of just continued to grow from that. I think a lot of the stuff that we output comes from just our own personal creative outputs and things that we want to do in our own free time as well. And that's sort of obviously steadily grown and evolved as more people have joined as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting process to be a part of.
I think as well for me, one thing that I found that's been really cool, especially with the label stuff and just generally putting more thought into our editorial voice, is that, and this is the conversation we've had with the team too, is that, yeah, we're so lucky we have the political independence from maybe other labels, or like we can, you know, all of us, Eastern Margins isn't our full-time work. Like we all have other jobs to support ourselves. But that means that, you know, we can take more of a stand than maybe other platforms that, yeah, just don't have that freedom. And so things with like Black Lives Matter, or that Jex is actually, like Jex, who's in Eastern Margins too, she does a lot of writing, and that's been really good to kind of put our stance on things. And with the artists we work with, you know, we've changed our mind about some artists that we realized don't adhere to our values, or some of the artists we've signed, we've worked with them to be like, you know, some of these photos are appropriating Black culture, or you sampled a song that is really like, you know, is by artists that we really don't agree with. So I think that's been interesting because, yeah, we've like the label side for sure has made me realize that actually we play like a mediary role as well to help translate our artists into the wider diaspora or the wider community too.
That leads me to, I mean, I have 2 questions. Maybe I'll start with you. You kind of use the word translation. I think that you probably mean in a different way here, translating content to diaspora, but how do you deal with linguistic barriers? With dealing with such a widespread region.
Well, at our last meeting, we were actually just discussing some of our label releases, and we were talking about Il Japonya's first release with us, and we were talking about how it had been performing on this music platform in China. I can't exactly remember which one it was. I think we were talking about how one of the comments was, despite the fact that he couldn't understand what Taigun was saying, he could really feel what he meant, and he really understood the music and he got it, which is really quite amazing feedback to get, considering, you know, I think Taigun's speaking in Japanese as well as a invented language of his. So, you know, I think there's a lot of power for music to go beyond just linguistic barriers, especially when we're in this sort of realm where music's a lot more textural in both of its production and vocals. It sort of breaks down these barriers, which is really interesting.
I think that's exactly right, Ant. I mean, I just, taking Tigan's, taking Il Japonia's EP as an example, we actually put quite a lot of effort into working with him on the translations, tidying them up so that, where things were metaphorical that came directly out of Japanese, we would change that into something that made more sense in English. And I think actually that might have all been to some degree unnecessary. I mean, it was definitely a really good way for us to understand better what Taigen was working on. But so much of this music really is able to connect with people around the world, despite the language that it's in, especially when at its core it's evocative in a physical sense, that it's trying to invite you to dance or it's trying to stir up emotions in your body. Sometimes the lyrics aren't the most important bit. And my only regret is that I imagine if you did understand the lyrics in so much of the music we listen to, it would be more impactful. But that's not to say that it's not hugely impactful nonetheless. And I think one of the really important things that we're trying to get across is that you shouldn't be limited to just listening to music in your own language. There's so much beautiful music out there. We as a collective don't understand Korean, don't understand Japanese, but yet we love the music that these guys are producing. And if we want to do a bit more research on how their lyrics translate, sometimes we do, sometimes it's not necessary.
Completely agree with this. The only thing I'd add is that, however, in our tea houses, the linguistic barriers, has been something that we need to put more thought into. And like the earlier interviews we did, we tried to do in English, and we just realized that we weren't representing, or accurately representing our speakers' stories enough. And so that's when we've really made a point to do the interviews in native languages. So like when we spoke to the club owners of oil in Shenzhen, that was all in Mandarin. And I think that whole series on Shenzhen was in Mandarin. But of course, that means there are limitations when none of us really speak Vietnamese, for example, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's really important for us to represent those stories in their own words.
Elaine mentioned that you guys write content. You and Stefan focus a lot on the content. And then I think in some of your interviews before, you use the word creating discourse around, and the Japanese rave, like you try to in some way create understanding or use words to textually explain what that is. How else, I mean, how do you nurture this discourse, and do you find how have you seen it make an impact, or how are people responding to and increasing knowledge around this field?
I think we have a long way to go. I would say sort of the work that we're doing, we have a monthly show at NTS Radio in London, and we use that as a way of kind of highlighting new types of music, new areas and genres that we're working with. For example, when we gave the Shenzhen guys a slot, or when we were reached out to Annam to put some music in, or something like Indonesia, those were all really important to us, because ultimately we want the people who follow us, whether they're just on Instagram or they're closer with us and part of our community that we see regularly, we want them to be as familiar with the artists that we found, with the artists that we're working with, and the music scenes that they represent as we are. And I mean, at least personally, I'd quite like to continue on the work that we were doing, showing the Shenzhen music scene, looking at oil. I thought actually clubs can have so much of an important foundation for music scenes and what cultural aspects in their respective regions or cities, that'd be something that we could be working on more to highlight. To the extent that when you've got just a normal and sort of typical dance culture where you've got certain clubs like, I don't know, Berghain in Berlin or Fabric in London, which are kind of seen as meccas of the dance world. I'd like it if some of these clubs that are actually putting out a more varied list of DJs, more eclectic type of music, if they were also kind of seen as, wow, I'd really like to visit that club. I'd like to see what is going on there, Do you know what you guys think?
What I found very interesting about the way I feel like our discourse with our community has changed from physical events. Because I think before, with physical events, it's like, you know, everyone comes in person, experiences it in person. That's so visceral. That's how we feel we're facilitating engagement with our community. Since we've gone digital and everything's, you know, been more online, etc., I feel like I've been impressed anyway with how Eastern Margins has been more creative with how like with the focus on interaction with our audience. So like Stefan recently made a super cool filter, like a Snapchat kind of Instagram filter that people can use, which was tied to the release of Sumu Sumu and Lane's their latest EP in all their like visual style. We have like 2 projects we're talking about at the moment. One we're kind of waiting for to see if we get funding for from the British Council. Pick us, but it's all about this like online community center for the Vietnamese diaspora, where we connect Vietnamese artists locally with like Vietnamese artists in the UK, and it's all about them collaborating and creating these like online virtual rooms where we want our audience to engage with us too. Literally just in our meeting yesterday, we talked about doing this open source project with Shanghai Community Radio, where we're discussing like how we basically just create an open source piece of music that like artists can add visuals and their own music edits to as well. So I feel like we're getting more creative anyway with like really interacting with our audience, whereas before it was like, okay, we'll put an event, people will come, that's maybe enough.
Yeah.
I guess it's just opening it up from a sort of one-way education from us kind of trying to tell people things to actually getting that kind of two-way stream and kind of building something together and collaborating.
What are you going to say, Anne?
I was say I think more recently as well, with all the restrictions we've found, in a way we're more free to work with people regardless of geography. You know, on this EP release with Sumu Sumu and Lanes, obviously Sumu Sumu is based in Japan and Lanes is based in the US, and we're working with visual artist Tabitha Swanson, who's based in Berlin, and you know, the ability to sort of have this discourse just amongst ourselves as well across geographies is, I think, really quite influential.
That leads me to my next question. So you guys said what, like 3 years ago, and I feel like you've picked up a lot of momentum, and obviously the events is a really effective way of bringing communities together and also connecting the people you listen to audiences. What kind of networks have you formed that are really surprising? Like, I don't know if there are music festivals around the world that have sort of reached out, and then also what kind of audiences have you nurtured, and is that surprising? Like, is it still diaspora primarily that, or mainly, that come and listen or seek out your content, or are there sort of really surprising audiences that are there? So network, also your audiences and what that looks like and who they are.
I guess it is pretty varied. I think that's one of the things about London. I mean, I think it's usually pretty diaspora or so heavy at our club nights, but you know, I would say it's still a pretty diverse club night. You've got pretty much anybody coming through, and I think that's in a way because we try and not. Obviously, we are a Southeast and East Asian club night, but we don't try and fence ourselves off. I think people sort of see the value that this is just experimental music in a way as well, which brings a lot of diversity to our club nights, which is nice. You don't really want to pigeonhole yourself as a club night for just Asians.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was interesting going to Eastern Margins nights was that actually there's like, of course, there's a high proportion of Asians maybe than in other club nights, but definitely loads of white people as well. And also like quite a lot of like fetish, like bondage style people. Like it's interesting.
It's like interesting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely cosplay. And I guess, for example, like Yule, she's like an anime like anime-inspired music producer. And I think, some of the artists that we platform do, like, it's about, I guess, being alternative on any fringes, whether, like, regardless of like race or ethnicity as well.
I think that is really a really important part of what we stand for. I mean, Eastern margins. We talk about margins because we're talking about the margins of music being a bit on the fringe, being a bit different, but also in terms of personalities, in terms of interests. Like the cyberpunk theme is often quite big among the people who come to our events with, the most incredible hair, the most incredible outfits, to the extent you've got like sort of horns and stuff being glued on faces. It's all aesthetically really, really cool. And I think, I mean, this is where, at least where I think it comes from, is that we looking to create a really safe and inclusive space. We have zero tolerance on any sort of harassment on our nights, especially, I mean, given the nature of it as an Asian night. We're also very conscious about the possibility of fetishization, but we really work so hard to make sure that our safe space policy is clear, that it's enforced, and that means that the people who come to our events can dress up the way they really want to. They can kind of put themselves out there. They can be inspired by artists as well who have really unique visuals and really unique aesthetics, because they don't need to feel like they're going to get judged or laughed at or harassed or anything.
Chantal, can you tell that Stefan is a lawyer? This is our policy. This is our.
No, I think that makes sense. What I'm trying to think what question we have a few questions left. If any, what has been the effect of Hong Kong or Hong Kong's? You guys are all from Hong Kong, so I don't know if that really matters on Eastern margins.
Wait, what was the question?
Does Hong Kong specifically does that have an effect on Eastern margins?
I think definitely, like, I don't know about you guys, but for me, for sure, as in I see my like identity rooted in Hong Kong as a large part of why I wanted to join Eastern Margins. And even with our like in terms of our Tea House series, normally they're just like one interview here, one interview there. We did a whole 3-part series in Hong Kong just because we knew that, like, it was just a really important topic for most of us. So I would say it's like hugely influential.
Yeah, definitely for me as well, in terms of just being homesick, wanting to reconnect. That also drove me to want to explore Eastern Margins, to see what sort of music we're out there. And I really love it when we can actually connect with the music scene that's going on in Hong Kong, when we work with Alex Melism or the other guys in Absurd Tracks, when we got to go to 20 Alpha last year, do sets on Hong Kong Community Radio. It's really nice to kind of be part of, going back and exploring what's going on in Hong Kong, what keeps it cool, what artists are doing, and also trying to help spread what they're doing further abroad.
That leads me to the next question. How do you understand being a colony kid or colony kids, which is the name of the show, especially as somebody who's both has a foot in Hong Kong and in London, and I guess with what's going on in Hong Kong right now, I imagine sometimes that is even tougher for people who have left Hong Kong, because it feels, it's equally helpless now, but I guess when the movement was happening, there was a sense of helplessness as well. So anyways, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but what do you think of the word colony kid, and what does that mean to you?
It's pretty interesting. I guess so. I moved to the UK when I was 13. So I've been here more than half my life. I think what's kind of interesting is when you grow up in Hong Kong, or at least back then, I remember the handover and stuff. And you always sort of thought, oh, I've got my B&O or whatever, the British National Overseas. You think that links are stronger than they actually are. But then when you're actually over here, you realize that it's just so like disparate. Like these links, they're so weak and vague in a way. I thought it was, I guess it's not really exactly what you're asking, but I thought there was a lot of irony in the situation with, the UK Home Office criticizing Hong Kong police for brutality, while at the same time inviting Hong Kong and a bunch of other ex-colonies to a big trade expo for like policing weapons and stuff. So I think, the relationship with Hong Kong being a colony and its own identity, it's all, I mean, I think the city's still probably really figuring it out in a way. It's only been 20 years.
Stefan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, for me, I think Colony Kid, it kind of speaks to a sort of it's kind of like people coming out of Hong Kong who, whether I see them in Hong Kong or whether I see them in London or in America or in Europe, I kind of immediately have a connection with them, even if they, like Ant kind of moved over when they were 13, or they kind of spent their entire lives going up to Hong Kong, or whether they returned or not after studying abroad. I think we all have a lot in common. There's the sense of an international aspect where you're just so comfortable with people from all different sorts of cultures. At the same time, there's a sense of confusion. I feel that so many people I know who've kind of come out of Hong Kong, while they're there, they don't necessarily feel like they're fully Cantonese, or they being Western is so much part of their identity that suddenly when they go abroad, they think, oh crap, I'm actually not as Western as I thought I was. And crap, I kind of want to go back and try and get a bit more of that, get a bit of more my culture. And I think that can sometimes be a difficult tightrope to walk, kind of where you actually from, what is your root culture, but at the same time, it's a really exciting opportunity. It's a really unique part of what makes us Hong Kong kids. And I think it's something to celebrate as well, where possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially with the kind of like, I don't know, being pulled in different directions. Because I've realized as well, in thinking about my Hong Kong identity, that there can be a difference between how you feel and how people see you, and that identity is all relative. So in England, I feel like I'm really representing Hong Kong. When people ask me about what's going on there, I feel like I need to be really up to date. Like I'm aware that my English friends are asking me because they think I'm like, more just like a member of that Hong Kong community. Whereas then when I'm in Hong Kong, because all of us went to international school, like my Cantonese isn't good, etc. I then feel like I feel at home in Hong Kong, but then I feel a little bit more removed from what's going on because I'm aware that with the recent protests, everything like that, it's like I can't say that it's my personal fight. My life isn't going to be like so negatively affected by what's happening. And so it's funny that like in England, I feel like I'm almost closer to the cause, whereas in Hong Kong, I'm clearly not the one like carrying the baton. So yeah, I feel like the colony kid phrase is very like captures all those kind of contradictions.
How would you define, this is the question we ask everybody, how would you define this generation?
We actually discussed this. Like, do you mean as in our generation or this generation of music or?
Are we part of the generation?
Yeah. Which generation?
So personally, I can go first. I would say this generation, and I guess I'm defining that as like just what we're kind of witnessing unfold, is really defined to me by rage and creativity. So like, I feel like we're in the angriest phase that I can remember. Everyone's angry at how badly the previous generations have handled things and what's going on and, the inequality and everything. But then I also feel like we're in a creative renaissance where people are so beyond labels, like that's not important anymore. Especially in Hong Kong, the one thing that's kind of keeping me going is it feels like there's such a creative emergence from all the trauma that we've experienced. So I think that rage and creativity is gonna, just be like a really exciting time going forward. What about you guys?
Yeah, for me, I think I define it by the interconnectivity of everybody in this generation. I mean, it's so easy to just say, just with the internet, people can connect like they never have before. But I think that is just so important. You can get ideas, you can get news from all over the world, and you can start working in the way that we started to, with people who have similar interests, with people who have similar aesthetics and vibes and music taste. And so as a result, you're kind of, this generation more than anything else has a chance to be almost hyper global. And weirdly, I think actually the coronavirus and all the lockdowns have kind of just cemented that. It's shown that you don't actually need to be able to fly somewhere to be able to connect with people or to engage with your family and friends. That can all just be done so easily from wherever you are, and it's really up to what people can make of it.
So I guess this generation doesn't really want to be defined. They want to be sort of authentic for themselves and to be able to do what they feel is, authentic for them, and to be able to sort of really try and connect with one another. Yeah.
Yeah, personally,
It's a bit of a non-answer, sorry.
No, and I was going to agree with you. I'm really vibing with Gen Z's kind of like beyond labeling.
Yeah.
I feel like we should all channel that energy.
It's sort of like, I'm just me and I'm going to do whatever I want. Not in a selfish way, but like, I'm not going to restrict who I sort of am, and I'm, going to express that.
And
Yeah, I
through your
love
years.
that. I think that's so important, and you can see that just everywhere on social media. TikTok as an example, just people just keep coming out with so much content, and it's just people are being creative, challenging themselves, like what do they want to put out to the world, and that's really cool.
And it's like, screw your establishment and tradition and years of like how you did things before. That just doesn't matter anymore.
Final question. What's next for Eastern Margins? What should we watch out for?
More unexpected things to come.
Well, we kind of touched on some of these projects that we're working on, with like the Vietnamese, like diaspora artist collaboration, and also this collab with Shanghai Community Radio. That's exciting. We definitely want to grow the label further. I know Lumi's working really hard on that side. Do you guys have anything else? Oh, and physical events, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm saying, watch this space. I'm really hoping that 2021 will be able to get back to some semblance of what you're doing before with the physical parties, in real life connection, really building that community, giving really unique and fun experiences and just cool parties. But in the meantime, we're going to keep putting out content. We're going to keep trying to see what we can do online, pushing those boundaries of what's possible in digital space.
Yeah, I think in a way, when we sort of are able to return to the physical realm, I think it's important for us to take what we've sort of learned from these last few months, this sort of hyper local but hyper global approach to being able to work with people, to explore really specific things and narratives and sounds, to sort of not forget, just because we're now able to explore London, that we should restrict ourselves to just our local geography, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. I think, this lockdown and the COVID has been hard, but there are definitely silver linings and things we should be learning. And I mean, if nothing else, I want to make sure that we take that attitude of being able to collaborate with people, wherever they're based, whoever we want to kind of keep that going forward.
Yeah.
And one thing on the physical event is we had a Bombing Tiger event planned that we've had to like postpone. Really hope that happens in 2021, which will be our year. Woo!
Cool. Thanks so much, guys. Any final thoughts you wanted to make sure everybody hears before, we part ways digitally tonight?
Just that we're really big fans of Eaton as well, and we're so happy that that you chose to speak to us, and we can't wait to visit you guys in person as well when we're next back in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon, yeah.
Hopefully soon. I'm sure your parents are also can't wait to have you guys back.
Just 100%. Just love what you guys are putting out in Hong Kong, the space that you've created. I mean, just looking online, the sort of shows that you have, the interviews that you have, really creating a sense of culture that I wish we had known when we were growing up.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
I'm sure when there's some semblance of normalcy, we'll do something together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it'll be a welcome back party, and then you guys do the programming, and we bring some of your artists into town. And
Yes.
Deal.
Okay,
Deal. Love that.
Chantal.
Absolutely.
We're gonna
Yeah.
take that as an official booking. So
it's locked, and it's on. We're gonna put this on YouTube. So
Yeah, it's important.
It's already on the Google Drive, so it's official.
yeah, this is a signed contract.
Well, thanks so much, guys. We will do some editing or whatever, and then this will probably be up in a few days.
Great.
Lots-
Thank you.